Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 52 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by James Valliant. We don't usually do, trigger warnings on our shows, but this today's topic is really we've talked about some pretty disgusting human beings on this show and on the reality show. I think this one is unique even among those. This guy makes the people who chant from the river to the sea look not so bad. On the other hand, he makes them possible, of course, him and the likes of him with the intellectual ammunition they provide for the side that wants to kill the Jews that are still around after the previous attempts to exterminate the Jews. Anyway, we're talking about Norman Finkelstein today. He's an American anti-Israel intellectual. He's somebody who, in trying to research this show, and by research I mean watching videos of his and reading his stuff, I just had to stop. Like, he is, because of how vile he is. I didn't even have lunch today, and I'm about to lose my lunch, so I'm gonna go to James Valliant with this. And yeah, another trigger warning is that it is possible that there will be repeated swearing, just because that's the
Well,
stream of words that come to mind when I think about this guy are not family friendly.
no, they're not. No, they're not. He is an American professor of political science with a PhD from Princeton University, no less, who taught at several universities. He's been denied tenure at one of them. For almost 10 years, he taught at my alma mater, New York University. And he has written books that are vile, dishonest, attacks on Israel, attacks on anyone who defends Israel. He's famous, become internationally famous for it. Some of his quotes are just unspeakable, but sort of speak for themselves. Back when people from the staff of the Paris magazine, Charlie Hebdo, were murdered by Islamist savages, he said the following, and I quote, "Two despairing and desperate young men act out their despair and desperation against this political pornography." And what he's calling political pornography there are images of the prophet. As you recall, that magazine published an image of the prophet, and of course that's sacrilege under Islam. So here we've got a political science professor from the United States calling free speech pornography, political pornography. I couldn't but stop that. Um, Political pornography, no different than Der Stürmer. He actually compares Charlie Hebdo to that. Who, in the midst of all of this death and destruction, decided somehow noble to degrade, demean, humiliate, and insult the people, that is to say, the Islamic people. I'm sorry, maybe it's very politically incorrect, but I have no sympathy for the staff of Charlie Hebdo. That is what he said in the wake of those killings. And in the immediate wake of October 7th, just some 51 days ago, he said the following in public. A professor, mind you, of political science, whose expertise is in Middle East Israel affairs, said the following: "For the past 20 years, the people of Gaza, half of whom are children, have been immured in a concentration camp. They breached the camp's walls today. If we honor John Brown, the hero from the American Civil War, mind you, if we honor John Brown's armed resistance to slavery, if we honor the Jews who revolted in the Warsaw Ghetto, I mean, talk about obscene, then moral consistency commands that we honor the heroic resistance in Gaza." This he said after October 7th. "I, for one, will never begrudge. On the contrary, it warms every fiber of my soul, the scenes of Gaza's smiling children as their arrogant Jewish supremacist oppressors have finally been humbled." That is what the man has said about October 7th. I saw an interview, Piers Morgan, the British journalist who appears frequently on American television as well, Piers did an interview with this professor, and I put the term in quotes, shortly afterwards, he was accepting everything Hamas said, taking at face value, minimizing the casualties, denying the facts as they were coming out that anyone could verify. And as I understand it, he still refuses to recognize many of the horrific factual details of the atrocities of October 7th, but then will also imply that even if they, to some extent, were true, that it was we must expect it, given the concentration camp, as he describes it, that Gaza is. Now, I don't recall folks from actual concentration camps coming out of Auschwitz raping, murdering, and burning children alive afterwards. No, I never recalled that. Nor do I recall any kind of relief happening. No, the reason why, of course, Gaza is hell is because Hamas has been ruling Gaza now for 16 years, and they have made it hell. They haven't lifted a single finger to make it a rights-respecting, peaceful, semi-prosperous place for their people at all. They are so fanatical. They elected Hamas, of course, 16, 17 years ago to govern them. And if the Egyptians and Jordanians don't want them in because they're violent fanatics, then of course it is the problem with the Palestinian people. No, to compare it to a concentration camp is vile and disgusting. Recently, a journalist that I do have some respect for, Douglas Murray, called Professor Finkelstein a psychopath, a sociopath. He's trying to say that it's somehow psychiatric, and the level of disconnect from reality would suggest to one perhaps psychosis. But I think there's another simpler option. He's just dishonest. He's just evil. He just refuses to look at the facts out of a predisposition to hate Israel and a predisposition. I mean, he is bought into all of the nonsense that we've been talking about here from these enemies of Israel. He has attacked anyone who tries to come up with a sane, even moderate defense of Israel, whether it's Professor Dershowitz, you name it. He has assaulted and attacked every mainstream or even moderate intellectual who attempts to raise a voice in defense of Israel, and he attacks them using the most unscrupulous, dishonest methods epistemologically. So I would have to say he's dishonest. He's just an evil human being defending evil that he could easily know and probably does easily know better about. So I wouldn't go to a psychiatric diagnosis as Douglas Murray does, although I have sympathy for his position, absent a psychiatric report. This guy's just a liar and hates the good for being the good. I mean, honestly, we're looking at a truly despicable, vile human being who refuses to name facts that are available to anyone. And if he in his own mind is refusing to accept those facts to some degree, it's out of pure intellectual dishonesty, in my view. But
I'm generally not a fan of, when people are on the wrong side of things, calling them crazy or stupid or anything like that. I think it comes from a good place in this case of Douglas Murray calling him psychotic, because it's difficult to believe that somebody could be so genuinely evil by choice. But
it is possible, ladies and gentlemen, and this is an example. This guy is dishonesty and evil incarnate.
Yeah, and you mentioned the comparisons. This is something they do. They compare it to concentration camps. They compare it to slavery. They'll make these comparisons. There's always a sick kind of irony when a socialist who advocates essentially for the extermination of the Jews calls other people Nazis. But we see this all the time.
In his case, it's particularly disgusting. He was born in 1953 in the United States, but he is an American Jew and the son of Holocaust survivors. And he wields that like a sword and a shield every time he gets. I am the son of Holocaust survivors. I'm an American Jew. He says that every time he can say it. And that only adds to the despicable nature of his dishonesty, in my view.
And by the way, the anti-Israel crowd loves these token Jews, who You see these protests in New York. Now, I didn't actually check if these people are actually Jewish, but it's supposedly a Jews for Peace or whatever they call themselves who blocked the streets, blocked Manhattan Bridge yesterday. But yeah, again, this guy's next level. So you mentioned his Substack from October 7th. I watched some of that Piers Morgan interview. I watched a little bit of him elsewhere. I really struggled to see this guy and hear him. He did say on Piers Morgan, he kind of walked it back, his October 7th Substack, but the way in which he walked it back shows you really how despicable he is. So he said either in one of those two that I saw, he said, initially I was euphoric because initially what we knew is that only 50 had died and so on. Okay, so if 50 people died, that's that's a good thing. But if I mean, to me, if 50 people are killed, that's a good thing. Why is the fact that more are killed not a better thing by his standards? I don't get that part, but also, you know, his Substack is still up. I can't read the whole thing because it asks me to become a paid subscriber, and you know, I thought about it, but I decided against. But it starts. The first sentence is the crocodile tears have begun over Israeli hostages taken by Gaza militants. Now, look, yeah, the numbers the number of dead, the number of those taken hostage were not known on October 7th, but the videos were out. Like the Hamas had put out videos. You could see people who were clearly abused, clearly all of them civilians or many of them civilians. There were videos of children. There was a video of the kid who was surrounded by Arab kids and abused by them while an adult was filming and streaming it. So this is the kind of thing that, you know, if somebody is against it, the Norman Finkelsteins of the world will call it crocodile tears. So yeah, you know, first of all, when you walk something back, why do you still keep it up? You can say, look, I made a mistake, so I deleted it. That's that's an okay thing to do. But you know, nothing this guy does
Now, he
is
hardly walked it back at all. He was still accepting Hamas data at face value, and still saying that, in effect, Israel had it in various ways had it coming to them. And he's defending racism using using the racism that against Jews. That language is not accidental. When they talk about it being a concentration camp, when they talk about it being look, if Israel actually had any intentions of genocide, obviously, well, I'm not even going to dignify the argument. Israel is the only one who gives a damn about civilians on either side. Obviously, Hamas is using their own civilians as intentional weapons, and he would never see that. And the very fact that women and children were taken hostage, the very fact that they're releasing grandmothers and children as they're trickling out, doesn't that atrocity by itself doesn't disturb him at all. No. This guy is vile. You know, he's written whole books where he talks about the Holocaust industry. The Holocaust industry, people who do analysis of the Holocaust or who try and detail the horrors of the Nazi treatment of Jews, the medical experiments of Mengele, the actual treatment of again, the impossible way I cannot describe. People were treated in the Nazi concentration. He dismisses, he belittles the entire experience of of the Jews under the Nazis. So on the one hand, he's decrying the quote Holocaust industry of people who complain about the Nazis, and on the other hand, defending Hamas. That speaks. He's a historian and a political scientist. He's a guy who does studies. He's an advocate for these things. There is no moral way that this guy can be honest. There is no way this guy. I understand that there are people that even I admire who've been willing to debate this guy. I would not give this guy 5 seconds of airtime or waste an ounce of my energy or breath on refuting a monster like this. No.
yeah. Sorry, it's I'm glad you're doing the heavy lifting on this. Just thinking about this guy makes me sick. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Vadim. Thank you, Bonnie, for your super chats. Yeah, I'm at a loss. Do you have anything, to add?
Completely at a loss. Yeah, that because he's so perversely turned things inside out, so perversely gotten the moral equation here wrong that it cannot be innocent. It is hatred of the good for being the good. That's all it is. Anyone who can't see the qualitative difference between Israel and all of the Muslim states that surround it, in terms of being a rights-respecting country versus, a country which absolutely has no theocratic tyranny that has no respect for individual rights, and to not see that clearly is to get the situation completely backwards. Of course, he is out there advocating for the atrocity, in effect, advocating for the atrocities of October 7th, nothing less. And I
Yeah,
don't think I can imagine saying something more despicable about a human being, but yeah, he is an advocate of the atrocities. I'm going to say it just like that, an advocate of the atrocities that we saw on October 7th. You and I knew within a couple of days that we were looking at over 1,000. Within a couple of days, we were on the air of this channel saying there were more than 1,000 victims. He
actually,
could.
we were on the channel. We were Nikos and I did the first show on this topic while this was still going on.
Yeah.
I think towards the end of it, and the official number was 22. And at the time, I said that the number is going to be in the hundreds. I didn't, I
But it only took us a
underestimated it. But
couple of
yeah,
days to realize it was going to be over 1,000. And they're still having a hard time identifying burnt bodies in hospitals in Tel Aviv to this day, finding it hard to get DNA samples or dental records so they can even identify families that were together burnt alive. Excuse my emotion, but that is exactly the kind of evil that these entities are justifying, with PhDs, mind you, and with columns in fancy magazines. It's despicable.
yeah. On that, we I read out. I had a solo episode where I read out some of the testimonies and some of the some statements by Israelis. One of which was actually from a video, an interview with a father of Emily Hand, who he was saying that somebody, I guess the IDF or whoever it was, came to him and said that she had been killed, and he said, and I something like, I shouted yes because I knew that the alternative was her being in Gaza, and that's worse than death. Then a couple of weeks ago, it was, or yeah, something like a couple of weeks ago, it was revealed that actually was she was misidentified. Again, a body has to be in a really bad condition if you for you to not really be able to say who it is. And she was released yesterday. So, but yeah, that is some good news in an episode about. But again, but this is the kind of thing that was not unknown to him when he said, even when he says, I thought there were only 50. It's not that he said, we initially heard that 1,500 had broken through the barrier, and 50 were killed. He knows the people that he is an advocate of. He knows that 1,500 of them marching into Israel will not kill only 50 people. They will kill as many people as they possibly can. So again, he's lying. He's lying whenever he speaks. He's lying when he's advocating for it. He's lying when he apologizes or walks it back a little bit. I mean,
Well, no,
in
he
his
goes
statement.
to lived in the West Bank. He's done research, interviewing Palestinians on the spot. He overtly defends Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas. He defends them. He defends their coordinated activity against Israel. When he says that they're breaking out of Gaza, what he wants, and this is really what he advocates, a one-state solution that gives Palestinians immediately every right in the book so that they can come take over Israel. That's his one-state solution. He is a monster. Yeah.
And when he says, initially I was euphoric, it reminded me of that Cornell professor who was speaking at a rally in
It was exhilarating.
yeah,
Yeah.
who said it was exhilarating, and it really makes you think. I mean, we've spoken about the universities on this channel before. We've spoken about them before October 7th, but it's good to get more examples of just how vile some of these people teaching in the humanities and universities are, and this brings out the best among them. So you can see that, and you
Now,
can kind of
America's world famous. Well, America is world famous for its great universities, places like Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Cornell and NYU. And people come from all over the world to study at American universities. But this is exactly the kind of, I'm going to try and not to use bad language here. This is exactly the vile, despicable lies that will be taught and promoted at American universities in their humanities and social sciences departments. And they are all supported on taxpayer dime of the Americans. And the American people better wake up and realize that the humanities and social sciences departments that their tax dollars are subsidizing promote this kind of vile, despicable material that emanates from someone's fingers or mouth.
Yeah, and when we see millions of people marching through the streets of Western countries in support of exterminating the Jews, which is what these protests, these rallies are. So it's a mixture of people who are educated in the mosques and people who are educated in the universities. They heard the reasoning either from the spokesperson on earth of Allah, or from these university professors preaching the ideas that are against everything in Western way of life that is positive. And so, yeah, I really, I've said I've become way more pessimistic than I was 2 months ago. I question what it is that can be done, other than, of course, sharing this content. But to what extent can we actually? I mean, we're never going to convince those people. I don't want to convince. I don't want Norman Finkelstein. He's done enough that if he does a whole mea culpa, I think the best thing he can do is kill himself. I don't think there's any coming back from what he's done. But the masses in the streets, what 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 chance do we have, basically, James?
It's criminals like this, intellectual criminals like this guy, who give the justification, the patina of rationality or intellectualism to these evil defenders of savagery. He is really the guy who gives the intellectual and moral sanction, the cover, if you will, to these evil monsters out there doing this. He's of course, he is opposed to civilization as such pretty consistently in his other political views. America's fight against Soviet communism was all misbegotten and evil, of course. Just it's consistent with his view about how the Holocaust has been exaggerated and misused. So he has no problem, in effect, defending totalitarianism, 20th century. So it should be no surprise to us now that he's defending Islamicism in the 21st century. Makes perfect sense. He consistently defends savagery and totalitarianism over civilization, reason, and freedom.
So James, we have a few minutes left, but I just having this guy on my mind is making my life worse. So
Yes. Well, anyone who decries the Holocaust industry, as if people like Professor, there are so many great books on the Holocaust. Take Dr. Peikoff's book, The Ominous Parallels. I guess Dr. Peikoff is part of this Holocaust industry, exploiting for intellectual purposes what the Nazis did to the Jews in slaughtering millions upon millions of innocent civilians, using them in medical experiments. The most disgusting, vile things happening. That they're turning into, that's just pure propaganda in one sense, and in the hands of people like Peikoff or even Professor Dershowitz from Harvard, in his view. That's how vile he is. And to do this while boasting, hey, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. Unspeakable, just unspeakable.
Yeah. All right. We have a few minutes. Let's go take a breather, and we'll be back with the reality show at at 6 p.m. UK time, which is less than 5 minutes from now. The title for that is "The Most Dangerous Country for Jews." That's which one is it? Stick around and
Interesting.
find out.
I was just having a conversation on another podcast with Rabbi Tovia Singer, and he was telling me how he's in Israel and doesn't plan on leaving. He feels safer in Israel than he would in Britain or the United States. That's what he said on air with me. One of the leading rabbis in Israel would rather be in Israel than in America or in Britain today. He feels safer. I find that very interesting. Anyway,
That is interesting. He's not going to be on the reality show, so
no,
we
no.
will hear I think some different views on this among the panelists. And then at 7 p.m. on our other channel, The Briefly Objective, we have a new video premiering. It is of Yaron Brook. The title is "Why the West Needs to Stand Up to Hamas." This is from an event he did here in London. So this content, unlike most of the content on The Briefly Objective, it's not taken out of any show or anything. If you weren't at that event here in London, you did not hear this content, and you will hear it for the first time at 7 p.m. on The Briefly Objective. There's a link in the live chat. There's a link in the description. And if you're not subscribed to that channel, now is a good time to subscribe. Thank you, James. We will see you all.
And thank you for letting me vent on Professor Finkelstein.
And thank you
I
for
needed
being
to
the
get this
one.
off my chest.
Thank you for being the one to vent, because I struggled with this from preparing to the show to actually talking about it. So thank you. I want to say we'll talk about more positive things. I mean, we'll talk about less negative things because very few things are as bad as that.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thanks, James.
Thank you,
Being
Razi.
back. Oh, wait,
Oh,
actually, since we do have a minute and a half, we did have a
yeah.
super chat a couple of days ago, which we didn't read. So
Oh,
let's that's a more positive way to end the show.
yeah.
So actually, now that I look at the super chat again, it's not necessarily a positive way. So Jeff Bannister said 720 freedom fighters will be released. This is as part of the exchange. How long before a killer is in the mix? Their victims in Israel are putting the justice they may have received on the table to get hostages out. Nobody talks about this either. Yes, I mean, look, the people being released are not killers because they failed. It's not that they didn't attempt to kill. That's why they were held by Israel. They were held for attempted attacks. I shared one of them on Twitter because it was caught in a security camera. They tell us it's women and children. There's a video that I shared of one of the women, a woman who tried to stab a soldier and failed. He won that fight. So yeah, and same for the children. By the way, these children are teenagers. They're not children. It's not
Yeah.
5-year-olds that Israel captured from their homes. That's what Hamas does. That's not what Israel does.
Right, exactly. No, it's absolutely insane. Trading hostages of that kind for hostages of that kind. But one are criminals and terrorists, the other are actual innocent civilians. And what we're doing by encouraging this trade, we're making hostage taking pay. We're making hostage taking pay. Of course, I'm delighted every time a hostage gets released. I'm thrilled. I'm emotional. But the point is that we're releasing more people who could perpetrate October 7th and encouraging it. To me, all I can think of is tremble and in fear about the future October 7th that are being set up.
Yeah, I agree. And now we are out of time. We will be back with the reality show in what is now a few seconds. Thank you, James. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you in a few seconds on the reality show. Bye.
Be well, my friends.
Recording stopped.